Imagine standing at the edge of a battlefield, not with swords and shields, but with the weight of impossible decisions pressing down on you. The stakes are high, the pressure is crushing, and yet somehow you remain unshaken. This is the power of Stoic leadership, a philosophy forged not in comfort but in the fires of adversity. Marcus Aurelius, the great Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. Those words weren't just poetry, they were the bedrock of his rule, a reminder that true leadership isn't about controlling the chaos around you, it's about mastering the chaos within. Stoicism isn't some dusty relic of the past. It's a razor-sharp toolkit for modern leaders navigating uncertainty, complexity, and relentless change. Think about the last time you faced a decision that kept you up at night, a career pivot, a financial risk, a moral crossroads. What if you could approach that moment with the calm clarity of a Stoic? Not by suppressing emotion, but by channeling it into unwavering focus. That's what we're diving into today, how Stoic principles transform doubt into decisiveness, fear into fortitude, and pressure into purpose. This isn't about memorizing quotes or pretending to be emotionless. It's about practical strategies, emotional control that sharpens your judgment, resilience that turns setbacks into stepping stones, and a mindset that sees obstacles as opportunities. Whether you're leading a team, building a business, or simply striving to take charge of your own life, these ancient ideas have never been more relevant. So let's strip away the jargon and get to the heart of what it means to lead with Stoic strength. By the end of this, you won't just understand these principles, you'll feel equipped to wield them. At the core of Stoic strength lies a simple but revolutionary idea, the dichotomy of control. Epictetus, the former slave-turned-philosopher, framed it like this: some things are within our power and some are not. Our opinions, desires, and actions, those belong to us. External events, other people's choices, even our own reputations, those lie beyond our direct command. This distinction isn't just philosophy, it's a mental filter that separates energy wasted from energy well spent. Picture a CEO navigating a company crisis, maybe a sudden market crash or a PR disaster. The Stoic leader doesn't obsess over the uncontrollable media reactions, competitor moves, or even shareholder panic. Instead, they zero in on what they can influence: clear communication, strategic pivots, and their own composure under fire. That's the dichotomy in action, redirecting focus from chaos to agency. But here's where most of us stumble. We trick ourselves into believing we control far less than we actually do. Ever caught yourself saying, "I had no choice"? That's often an illusion. Even in constraints, there's always some autonomy: how we interpret events, the attitude we bring, the small actions we take. The Stoic mindset flips the script. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" it asks, "What can I do with this?" So here's a challenge. Think of a stressor in your life right now: a work deadline, a strained relationship, a financial hurdle. Now draw two circles, one for what's truly outside your control and one for what isn't. You might find your circle of agency is wider than you thought. That's the Stoic advantage, turning mental clarity into actionable power. Seneca, one of Stoicism's sharpest minds, put it bluntly: emotion is the enemy of good judgment. He wasn't saying we should become cold or unfeeling. He was warning us about the fog of impulsivity. Picture this: you're in a heated debate and frustration starts boiling over. Your heart races, your thoughts scramble, and suddenly you say something you regret. That's emotional reactivity hijacking your logic. Now imagine the alternative, taking a deliberate pause, letting the storm inside you settle, then choosing your response. That's Stoic composure in action. This isn't about suppressing feelings, it's about creating space between stimulus and response. Seneca called it the intermediate moment, that critical sliver of time where we decide whether to be ruled by emotion or guided by reason. Modern psychology backs this up. Even a few seconds of pause can shift brain activity from the reactive amygdala to the prefrontal cortex, where rational decisions live. The Stoics were ahead of their time here. They understood that emotional mastery isn't a personality trait, it's a skill honed through practice. Here's how to start. Next time you feel a surge of anger, fear, or even excitement, try this exercise. Freeze. Literally stop moving for 5 seconds. Breathe deeply. Ask yourself, what story am I telling myself about this situation? Often, it's not the event itself that triggers us, it's the narrative we attach to it. A missed deadline becomes proof we're failing. A critical comment morphs into personal rejection. That pause disrupts the spiral, giving you back control. Think back to a recent decision where emotion took the wheel. Maybe you snapped at a colleague, splurged on something unnecessary, or avoided a tough conversation. Now replay it with that Stoic pause. How might your choice have changed? This isn't about guilt, it's about awareness. Every time we practice that pause, we weaken the grip of impulsive emotion and strengthen our capacity for clear, intentional action. The goal isn't to eliminate emotion, but to prevent it from eliminating you from the driver's seat. Seneca wrote letters advising friends to rehearse adversity mentally, not to dwell on negativity, but to drain fear of its power. By anticipating challenges calmly, we shrink their ability to ambush us emotionally. That's the Stoic edge, transforming emotional turbulence into steady momentum. Marcus Aurelius scribbled in his private journal a line that would outlive him by centuries. Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. That wasn't just introspection, it was a battle plan against the invisible enemy of distorted perception. Every leader faces this war. Our minds don't just process reality, they filter it through layers of bias, assumption, and emotional residue. The Stoics called this the discipline of perception, the rigorous practice of stripping away the stories we tell ourselves to see the world as it is, not as we fear or wish it to be. Take George Washington's infamous winter at Valley Forge. His army was starving, undersupplied, and deserting by the hundreds. Most leaders would have seen disaster, a lost cause. But Washington's letters reveal a mind trained in Stoic objectivity. He didn't deny the suffering, he saw it clearly, then asked, given these exact conditions, what's possible? That clear-eyed assessment led to ruthless prioritization, securing supply lines, drilling troops despite the cold, leveraging the hardship to forge a stronger force. The result, an army that emerged not just intact but battle-ready. That's the power of unbiased perception. It turns desperation into strategy. We all have these mental distortions. Ever assumed a colleague's curt email was passive aggression, only to learn they were rushed, or convinced a minor setback was catastrophic before gathering facts? These are judgment hijacks, moments where bias overrides reality. The Stoics practiced spotting them like a gardener weeds a plot. Epictetus urged his students to interrogate first impressions. Is this truly what's happening, or just my interpretation? Modern psychology confirms this wisdom. What we call cognitive distortions are often the root of poor decisions. Here's the practice. Pick one decision weighing on you right now, maybe a hiring choice, a financial commitment, or even a family disagreement. Now list the raw facts separate from your story about those facts. For example, fact sales dropped 20% this quarter. story, we're failing and need drastic changes. See the difference. One is observable, the other is narrative. The Stoic leader trains themselves to dwell in the first column, then deliberately chooses how or whether to engage the second. Your challenge today: identify one lens that regularly distorts your view. Maybe it's catastrophizing small setbacks, personalizing others' actions, or confirmation bias, seeking only what confirms your beliefs. Name it, then next time it surfaces, pause and ask, what part of this is fact and what part is my mind's spin? That space between raw event and reaction is where Stoic leaders are made. Because clarity isn't just about seeing the world accurately, it's about reclaiming your freedom to respond wisely. Courage in the Stoic tradition isn't about charging blindly into battle. It's about choosing your battles with unshakable conviction. The ancient Greeks called this Andrea, a virtue that blends bravery with wisdom. Take Cato the Younger, the Roman senator who stood alone against Julius Caesar's rise to power. He didn't act on impulse or ego. His defiance was a deliberate stand for the Republic's principles, even when he knew the odds were impossible. That's Stoic courage, boldness rooted in values, not recklessness fueled by emotion. Modern leadership demands this same balance. Imagine a startup founder deciding whether to pivot their entire business model. The reckless move, burning through cash on a hunch without data. The timid move, sticking to a failing strategy out of fear. The Stoic move, weighing the risks coldly, preparing for multiple outcomes, then committing fully once the path aligns with core principles. This isn't about avoiding risk, it's about owning it with clarity. The line between courage and foolishness often comes down to one question: is this action driven by principle or impulse? A politician filibustering for a deeply held belief shows Andrea. One picking fights for media attention does not. A CEO disrupting an industry with ethical innovation embodies Stoic courage. One chasing trends at the expense of their team's stability does not. Both may look bold from the outside, but the difference is in the foundation. Here's where self-awareness becomes your compass. Do you lean toward paralysis, overanalyzing until opportunity fades? Or toward impulsivity, leaping before looking because action feels heroic? The Stoic remedy is a three-step filter. First, ask what's the principle here? Second, what's the worst-case scenario and can I accept it? Third, is this the most effective way to serve my purpose? Cato used this framework when he chose to fall on his sword rather than live under tyranny. Extreme, yes, but it was a calculated stand, not a theatrical gesture. Your challenge today: reflect on a recent decision where you hesitated too long or acted too fast. Rewind the tape. Where did principle and preparation intersect or get overshadowed by fear or haste? Courage isn't the absence of doubt. It's moving forward with doubt, armed with reason. That's how Stoics turn boldness from a gamble into a strategy. Seneca called it premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. At first glance, it sounds pessimistic, even morbid. Why dwell on what could go wrong? But here's the Stoic twist. By mentally rehearsing adversity, you strip it of its power to shock or derail you. This isn't about expecting failure, it's about immunizing yourself against panic. Picture a pilot running through emergency checklists before takeoff. They're not assuming disaster, they're ensuring calm competence if it arrives. That's the essence of this practice, transforming the unknown into the familiar, so when challenges arise, you respond with precision, not paralysis. Consider the legendary explorer Ernest Shackleton. Before his ill-fated Antarctic expedition, he obsessed over every possible catastrophe: shipwreck, starvation, mutiny. He didn't do this out of fear, but to engineer solutions in advance. When his ship, the Endurance, was crushed by ice, his crew survived because he'd already visualized this scenario. He'd stockpiled extra supplies, trained his men in extreme conditions, and even planned morale-boosting activities for prolonged isolation. While others might have frozen in despair, Shackleton acted because in his mind he'd already been there. Modern leaders use this same tool in boardrooms and startups. A CEO facing a potential merger doesn't just fantasize about synergies. They war-game the worst-case scenarios, cultural clashes, integration failures, market backlash. By confronting these possibilities early, they spot hidden risks and craft contingency plans. The result, when turbulence hits, they're not scrambling, they're executing a pre-rehearsed playbook. Here's how to apply it. Take an upcoming high-stakes moment, a product launch, a difficult negotiation, a career transition. Now close your eyes and vividly imagine 3 things going catastrophically wrong. Maybe your product flops, your counterpart walks out, or the job offer falls through. Sit with that discomfort, then ask, what would I do next? The goal isn't to dwell on doom, but to uncover hidden levers of control. Often, you'll realize you have more options than you thought, or at least the mental resilience to endure. This practice has a neurological superpower. It reduces the amygdala's panic response by making threats feel familiar. Navy SEAL use a version of this in Hell Week. They mentally rehearse exhaustion, cold, and pain until their brains treat hardship as routine. You don't need extreme conditions to benefit. Even rehearsing a tough conversation or a missed promotion can rewire your reaction from dread to readiness. Try this today. Pick one challenge on your horizon and spend 5 minutes visualizing it unraveling. Then script your response step by step. Notice how the fear shrinks when you replace uncertainty with action. That's the Stoic secret. What you anticipate, you can navigate. And in that space between preparation and adversity, true leadership is forged. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who taught from a wooden stool in ancient Greece, had a radical idea for his students, one that still cuts against the grain today. He said, make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. At its core, this is about separating your worth from outcomes you can't fully control. Think of an Olympic sprinter who trains for years, perfecting every stride, only to lose gold by 1/100th of a second. Does that sliver of time define their effort? Of course not. Yet how often do we judge ourselves by the finish line rather than the race we ran? This isn't about abandoning ambition. It's about freeing yourself from the tyranny of results. Modern psychology calls this the locus of control shift. When you tie your identity to external validation, promotions, praise, perfect metrics, you hand over your confidence to forces outside your command. The Stoic alternative: pour everything into your preparation, your ethics, your daily discipline, then let go of the rest. Ancient gladiators understood this. They controlled their training, their stamina, their courage in the arena, but never the crowd's thumbs up or down. That detachment wasn't resignation, it was liberation. Here's where this mindset becomes a superpower for decision makers. Paralysis often stems from fear of imperfect outcomes. What if the project flops? What if the investment tanks? Stoicism flips the script. Focus on the quality of your input, not the unpredictability of the output. A chef can't control whether every diner loves the meal, but they can obsess over sourcing the freshest ingredients and mastering each technique. That shift removes the weight of hypothetical futures, letting you act with clarity. Take a current challenge you're facing, maybe a creative project, a fitness goal, or a tough negotiation. Now ask, what parts of this are truly mine to own? Your research, your persistence, your integrity, those belong to you. Market reactions, others' opinions, even luck. Those don't. When you internalize this divide, something remarkable happens. the pressure to succeed transforms into the commitment to show up fully. That's how athletes like Michael Jordan could miss game-winning shots without crumbling, because their worth was rooted in relentless practice, not a single moment's outcome. Try this reframe today. Pick one goal where you've been obsessing over results. Write down every step within your control, then physically cross out what isn't. Notice how the list shifts from "what if I fail" to "here's what I can do." That's the Stoic edge, turning anxiety into agency, one deliberate effort at a time. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire with a quill in hand, filling his private journals with reflections on the power of restraint. "Words are like arrows," he wrote. "Once loosed, they cannot be called back." In a world addicted to hot takes and instant reactions, this Stoic emperor modeled something radical: the strategic strength of silence. Consider how he handled Rome's endless political squabbles. While senators clamored to voice opinions, Aurelius often listened first, absorbing arguments without revealing his stance. That pause wasn't indecision, it was tactical. By withholding his words, he gained three advantages: time to refine his judgment, leverage to observe others' true motives, and the aura of authority that comes from measured speech. Silence isn't passive, it's a precision tool. Think of a high-stakes negotiation where every word carries weight. The amateur rushes to fill gaps with concessions or chatter. The Stoic, they let silence linger like a third party at the table. A study of hostage negotiators found the most effective professionals used deliberate pauses, sometimes up to 10 seconds after tense statements. Why? Because silence pressures the other side to reveal more, backtrack, or even self-correct. It's the verbal equivalent of a chess player refusing to move until they've calculated 5 steps ahead. But here's where we stumble. We confuse silence with weakness or disengagement. Ever interrupted someone just to avoid an awkward pause, or jumped to defend yourself before fully hearing criticism? That's fear masquerading as urgency. The Stoics practiced listening beyond words, not just waiting to speak. Epictetus trained his students to endure insults without reaction, not to suppress emotion, but to master the space between provocation and response. In that space lies freedom, the choice to answer with purpose or not at all. Try this exercise today. In your next conversation, count to 3 before replying. Notice how often your first instinct is to agree, deflect, or dominate. That gap is where wisdom grows, and when faced with conflict, experiment with saying only this: "Let me think about that." No justification, no instant rebuttal. Just a pause long enough to separate reaction from strategy. Reflect on a recent moment where words escaped you too quickly, maybe an angry text sent, a rushed promise made, or an idea undersold because you spoke before it was fully formed. Now reimagine it with Aurelius' discipline. What might you have learned or preserved by listening longer or speaking less? The Stoics knew something modern leaders are relearning. Sometimes the most powerful statement isn't what you say, but what you choose not to. Seneca once wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." At first, that sounds counterintuitive. Shouldn't smooth sailing make us happier? But the Stoic twist is this: true strength isn't born in comfort, it's forged when we stop blaming the storm and start steering the ship. Think about the last time you faced a setback. Did you waste energy pointing fingers, or did you ask, what part of this is mine to fix? That's the dividing line between leaders who falter and those who rise. Take the legendary turnaround of Ford Motor Company in 2006. CEO Alan Mulally inherited a sinking ship, billions in losses, infighting among executives, and a culture of deflecting blame. His first move, he replaced the traditional highlight reel status updates with a radical transparency system. Every leader had to flag problems in red, yellow, or green, no sugarcoating. At first, executives hid flaws, afraid of repercussions. Then Muley did something shocking. He applauded the first leader brave enough to admit a red flag. "That's how we'll fix this," he said. By modeling accountability instead of assigning blame, he transformed fear into collective problem solving. Within 3 years, Ford was profitable again, without the government bailouts its competitors needed. That's Stoic ownership in action, seeing responsibility not as a burden but as the only path forward. The irony, blame shifting often feels easier in the moment. The market crashed, my team dropped the ball, the system is rigged, but each excuse steals a piece of your power. Seneca's letters to Lucilius hammer this home. You are your own obstacle. You are the thing you must overcome. He wasn't preaching guilt, he was offering liberation. When you stop waiting for external saviors and start interrogating your own choices, setbacks become puzzles you're equipped to solve. Here's the practice. Pick one lingering challenge in your life, a strained relationship, a stalled project, a health goal you've neglected. Now trace it back to your last crossroads. Did you defer a tough conversation? Delay a decision hoping for perfect conditions. Avoid feedback that stung. The goal isn't self-flagellation, it's spotting the pivot points where your agency lived. Even in situations where you're only 10% at fault, focus relentlessly on that 10%. That's the space where growth happens. Accountability isn't about wearing failure like a badge, it's about wearing your response like armor. When a startup founder owns a product flop publicly, they earn trust. When a parent admits a mistake to their child, they teach resilience. Even Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire, wrote nightly reflections on where he'd fallen short. That's the Stoic creed: progress over perfection, ownership over excuses. So here's your challenge today. Identify one area where you've been whispering "it's not my fault" and ask instead, "What's my next move?" Because the moment you claim the problem is the moment you unlock the solution. Nassim Taleb's concept of antifragility, the idea that some systems don't just endure chaos but thrive because of it, could have been ripped straight from Stoic journals. While Taleb framed it in modern terms, Marcus Aurelius lived it centuries earlier. Picture this: the emperor ruling Rome during plague, war, and betrayal, yet writing in his personal notes, the obstacle becomes the way. He wasn't spinning hardship into empty optimism. He was recognizing a core truth: pressure doesn't just test strength, it forges it. This isn't theoretical. Look at Aurelius' life. At 12, he lost his father. At 17, his adoptive father, Emperor Antoninus, died, thrusting him onto the throne unprepared. Then came the Antonine Plague, which wiped out millions, including his co-emperor and likely his own son. Yet his reign is remembered as Rome's golden age of philosophy in action. Why? Because he didn't just survive adversity, he weaponized it. Each crisis became a whetstone to sharpen his judgment, compassion, and resolve. The Stoic antifragile mindset flips the script on resilience. Most people think resilience means bouncing back to where you were before the storm. Stoics go further. They use the storm to build sturdier foundations. Take the blacksmith's blade. Fire and hammering don't ruin good steel. They align its molecular structure to make it unbreakable. That's the difference between enduring hardship and evolving through it. Here's how to cultivate this. Grab a journal and revisit a past struggle, a failed project, a personal loss, a career detour. But don't just recount what happened. Ask these Stoic questions. What did this reveal about my strengths I didn't know I had? What skills did I develop only because I was forced to? How did this reshape my priorities for the better? You're not reframing pain as positive. You're identifying the tangible growth it ignited. Modern psychology calls this post-traumatic growth, but the Stoics were mapping it long before labs existed. When Seneca was exiled to Corsica, he didn't wallow. He produced his most profound letters. Epictetus, born a slave, turned his suffering into a masterclass on inner freedom. Their secret: they didn't wait for calm seas to practice navigation, they learned to sail in hurricanes. Your challenge today: pick a current frustration, a delayed goal, a strained relationship, a financial squeeze. Now play out the antifragile scenario. If this persists, what muscles will I have to develop? Maybe patience becomes your new superpower. Maybe creativity flourishes under constraints. The goal isn't to wish for struggle, but to trust your capacity to transmute it, because the Stoic truth is this: you aren't just built to withstand life's blows, you're designed to strike back sharper. Julius Caesar stood on the banks of the Rubicon with a single sentence that would echo through history: Alia iactu isti, the die is cast. In that moment, he didn't call for another council of advisors or demand more intelligence reports. He understood what the Stoics later codified: time isn't just money, it's life itself, slipping through our fingers while we weigh imaginary perfect conditions. The Stoic leader knows that indecision isn't neutrality, it's a silent thief of opportunity. Consider how Seneca framed procrastination: you act like mortals in all you fear, and like immortals in all you desire. We delay decisions as if we have infinite tomorrows, yet panic when deadlines loom. The antidote: treat time as the non-renewable resource it is. Marcus Aurelius would write reminders to himself like you could leave life right now, not to be morbid but to sharpen his focus. When every choice carries the weight of mortality, hesitation loses its grip. But here's the critical distinction Stoics make: decisiveness isn't recklessness. It's the alignment of action with principles. Picture a general who must choose whether to engage the enemy at dawn. The impulsive leader charges without scouting. The paralyzed leader waits for perfect certainty. The Stoic, they gather available intelligence, consult their strategic values, then commit, knowing that even a good decision executed now beats a perfect one delayed. That's why Caesar crossed the Rubicon when he did. Not because victory was guaranteed, but because further delay would have corroded his army's morale and his own authority. Modern psychology reveals a fascinating parallel. The ostrich effect describes how we avoid difficult decisions by mentally burying our heads, delaying medical checkups, ignoring financial statements, or ghosting career choices. Each delay compounds the cost. A study of CEOs found that the most effective leaders weren't those who made the most decisions, but those who resolved them fastest. Why? Because unresolved decisions create cognitive backlog, mental clutter that drains focus from the present. So here's your Stoic challenge. Identify one decision you've been circling, whether it's ending a stagnant relationship, launching a side project, or even just having that hard conversation. Now set a literal deadline, not someday, but this Friday at 5 p.m. Write it down, tell someone. The Stoics called this pre-commitment, a binding pact with your future self. When the hour arrives, ask, what would the principled version of me do? Then act, no more deliberation. Because here's the truth every Stoic internalizes: not deciding is still a decision, just one where you've handed the reins to chance. Caesar knew crossing the Rubicon might mean civil war, but he also knew that not crossing meant surrendering to stagnation. Your Rubicon moment might be quieter, a career leap, an apology, a lifestyle change, but the stakes are just as real. The die isn't cast by fate, it's in your hand, now throw it. Seneca's letters to Lucilius contain a striking contradiction. He writes about the brevity of life, how we squander years on trivial pursuits, yet in the same breath, he argues for patience so profound it spans decades. No great thing is created suddenly, he warns, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig is. At first glance, this seems hypocritical. Why urge urgency about time while preaching patience? But here's the Stoic genius: they weren't contradictions at all. Recognizing life's shortness isn't about rushing. It's about refusing to waste a single day on pursuits that don't align with your deepest purpose. The Stoic long view isn't passive waiting, it's active compounding. Consider the contrast between modern leadership's obsession with quarterly earnings and Warren Buffett's forever holding period for stocks. Most CEOs face relentless pressure to deliver short-term results, often at the expense of long-term value, cutting R&D to boost this quarter's numbers, or chasing trends instead of strengthening core capabilities. Buffett, a known admirer of Stoic philosophy, operates differently. He buys businesses he'd be content owning if the stock market closed for 10 years. That's not just strategy, it's a Stoic discipline of aligning actions with timeless principles rather than transient applause. The irony: this patience creates more wealth. A dollar invested in Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway in 1965 would be worth over $30,000 today, proof that the slowest path often outpaces the sprint. The modern world conspires against this mindset. Social media rewards viral moments over sustained mastery. Politicians prioritize election cycles over generational infrastructure. Even personal goals get hijacked. We want fluent Mandarin in 3 months or six-pack abs in 30 days. Seneca saw this coming 2,000 years ago. Men are frugal in guarding their personal property, but as soon as it comes to squandering time, they are most wasteful. The antidote: treat time as your scarcest resource, but your goals as vineyards needing seasons to bear fruit. Here's where Stoic patience becomes tactical. The Roman general Fabius Maximus, facing Hannibal's unstoppable army, refused to engage in decisive battles. Instead, he harried supply lines, eroded morale, and waited, earning the nickname Cunctator, the delayer. His peers called him cowardly. History proved him brilliant. By resisting the urge for a heroic but reckless showdown, he saved Rome. That's the long view in action, trading the dopamine hit of quick wins for the enduring satisfaction of inevitable victory. Your challenge today: audit one area where you're sacrificing the future for present comfort. Maybe it's skipping deep work for shallow tasks that feel productive, or avoiding a difficult skill that would take years to master but pay dividends for decades. Now apply Seneca's vineyard test. Is this the kind of effort that, sustained for 10 years, would make me unrecognizably capable? Because the Stoics understood something our instant gratification culture forgets. The most powerful forces in life, compound interest, trust, mastery, all demand one non-negotiable ingredient: the willingness to let time work for you, not against you. Buffett famously said his favorite holding period is forever. The Stoics would add, so is your legacy. Plant trees whose shade you'll never sit under, not because it's altruistic, but because it's the only way to outpace the tyranny of the urgent. After all, the oak doesn't resent its century of growth. It leans into it. So should you. Epictetus posed a question that cuts to the bone of ethical leadership. What kind of person do you want to be? Not what titles you want to hold, not what rewards you seek, but who you fundamentally are when no one's watching. That's the Stoic litmus test for every decision. The Enchiridion, his manual for living, doesn't offer complex moral theories, just a relentless focus on aligning action with character. First say to yourself what you would be, he wrote, then do what you have to do. This isn't about lofty ideals, it's about the daily discipline of choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. History's most enduring leaders understood this. Take Abraham Lincoln's decision to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. Politically, it was risky. It alienated moderates, energized Confederates, and wasn't even enforceable in rebel states. But Lincoln, who kept a copy of Marcus Aurelius' Meditations in his desk, recognized a truth the Stoics championed. Real strength isn't measured by tactical wins, but by the courage to act on conviction. The proclamation didn't instantly end slavery, but it redefined the war's purpose and Lincoln's legacy. Compare that to executives who fudge numbers for a quarterly report, or politicians who trade principles for polls. The Stoic leader asks, will this choice withstand the scrutiny of my future self? Ethical shortcuts often masquerade as pragmatism. We tell ourselves just this once or everyone does it. But the Enchiridion warns, every habit and capability is confirmed and grows in its corresponding actions. Translation: small compromises erode your moral muscle memory. A study of corporate scandals reveals a startling pattern. Rarely do people leap straight to fraud. They descend gradually, a fudged deadline here, a white lie there, until the unthinkable feels normal. The Stoic remedy: treat every choice, no matter how minor, as a referendum on your integrity. Here's where Stoicism gets tactical. The next time you face a gray area decision whether to shade the truth on a resume, take credit for a team's work, or ignore a friend's toxic behavior, run this three-step audit. First, what would the most principled version of me do? Second, if this action became public tomorrow, would I stand by it? Third, does this align with the legacy I want to leave? Notice these aren't about outcomes, but identity. Because when you anchor decisions to who you are rather than what you gain, you cultivate something no market crash can take: self-respect. Consider the pharmaceutical executive who halts a lucrative drug launch over safety concerns, or the athlete who admits doping despite guaranteed medals. These aren't just moral stands, they're strategic ones. Trust, once broken, costs far more to rebuild than any short-term gain. The Stoics called this eudaimonia, flourishing through virtue. Modern research confirms it. Ethical leaders outperform their peers long-term in employee retention, customer loyalty, and even stock performance. Your challenge today: pick one recent decision that felt slightly off. Maybe you gossiped to fit in, cut corners on a project, or stayed silent when you should have spoken. Replay it through Epictetus' lens. Did this action reflect the person I aspire to be? No guilt, just clarity. Because ethical clarity isn't about perfection, it's about course correcting before the compass breaks. And in a world full of moral fog, that's the ultimate competitive edge. The ancient Stoics had a radical training method they called ascesis, voluntary discomfort. It wasn't about punishing themselves, it was about immunizing their minds against life's inevitable hardships. Think of it like a vaccine. By exposing yourself to small, controlled doses of stress, you build resilience against the real thing. The philosopher Musonius Rufus put it bluntly: how can a person become courageous if they only seek comfort? He wasn't just talking about physical toughness. He was describing decision-making stamina, the ability to think clearly when others panic. Modern elite forces like the Navy SEAL apply this same principle in their infamous Hell Week. Candidates go days without sleep, plunge into freezing water, and push through exhaustion that would break most people. But the goal isn't just to test physical limits, it's to reveal who can maintain focus when every instinct screams to quit. SEAL instructors don't just want tough recruits, they want operators who can calmly assess a mission while shivering in the ocean at 3 a.m. That's Stoic ascesis in action, training the mind to detach from discomfort so judgment stays sharp under fire. You don't need a Hell Week to benefit from this. Start with microdoses of voluntary hardship. Take cold showers, not because they're pleasant, but because they teach your brain to override the impulse for instant comfort. Try intermittent fasting for a morning. The hunger pangs aren't the point. It's about noticing the urge to grab a snack and choosing to pause instead. These small acts rewire your relationship with discomfort, proving to yourself that you can endure far more than you think. The key is intentionality. When Seneca slept on a thin mattress or Cotto wore shabby clothing in winter, they weren't rejecting comfort, they were rehearsing for the day comfort might vanish. A CEO who practices this might fly economy before a crucial investor meeting, not to save money, but to remember that their worth isn't tied to luxury. A parent might leave their phone at home during a family outing, training themselves to sit with the itch of missing out. Here's your challenge: design a small discomfort ritual this week. Maybe it's waking up 30 minutes earlier to meditate in the cold dark, or writing an important email by hand instead of rushing it out. The goal isn't suffering, it's noticing the space between stimulus and response where your real power lies. Because when life inevitably throws chaos your way, you won't just survive it, you'll lead through it. Marcus Aurelius scribbled a line in his private journal that would become the battle cry for generations of leaders: "The obstacle is the way." At first glance, it sounds like empty optimism, like slapping a motivational poster over real adversity. But this wasn't naive positivity. It was a tactical reframe, a mental jiu-jitsu that transforms barriers into stepping stones. Picture a tech startup whose flagship product flops spectacularly. The amateur founder spirals into blame: the market wasn't ready, investors didn't get it, competitors cheated. The Stoic founder, they dissect the wreckage for hidden clues. Maybe the failed product revealed an underserved niche. Maybe the technical hurdles uncovered a more scalable solution. That's not silver lining thinking, it's strategic alchemy, turning leaden setbacks into golden pivots. Look at Instagram's origin story. It began as Bourbon, a clunky location check-in app drowning in features. When users ignored most functions but obsessively shared photos, the team didn't double down on their original vision. They burned Bourbon to the ground and rebuilt it as a photo-sharing app with surgical focus. That pivot wasn't desperation, it was Stoic opportunity spotting in action. The obstacle of failing product literally became the way forward. The victim mindset asks, "Why is this happening to me?" The Stoic architect asks, "What can I build with this?" Consider the difference between two employees facing a demotion. One ruminates on unfairness, poisoning their work ethic. The other audits their skill gaps, volunteers for stretch projects, and emerges stronger. Same circumstance, divergent trajectories. Neuroscience reveals why this works. When we label challenges as threats, our brains trigger fight or flight, narrowing focus to survival. But when we frame them as puzzles, the prefrontal cortex lights up, the seat of creative problem solving. The Stoics were neuroscientists before the term existed. Your turn: grab a current obstacle, a rejected proposal, a strained partnership, a missed target. Now perform this mental dissection. First, strip away the emotional narrative. What are the raw facts? Second, ask, what does this reveal that I couldn't see before? Maybe the rejection exposes flawed assumptions. Maybe the tension highlights misaligned values. Third, and most crucially, how could this very obstacle be the shortcut I've been missing? A chef's oven breaks mid-service, forcing them to spotlight raw dishes, unexpectedly launching a crudo craze. A writer's manuscript gets rejected, pushing them to self-publish, accidentally pioneering a new genre. History's greatest innovations weren't plan A's. They were detours that became destinations. This isn't about pretending hardship doesn't hurt. It's about refusing to let pain go to waste. When the Japanese art of kintsugi repairs broken pottery with gold, the cracks aren't hidden, they're illuminated. Your obstacles are no different. That failed venture, it's the gold vein revealing your true leadership mettle. The setback you're facing right now, it's not blocking your path, it's preparing you to walk a better one. So here's the Stoic challenge. Don't just overcome your obstacle, let it remake you. Epictetus described the mind as an impregnable fortress, an inner citadel no external force could breach without your consent. That image wasn't just poetic, it was a battle plan. Because before you can lead armies, companies, or even households, you must first garrison your own thoughts. The Stoics knew this truth long before modern psychology confirmed it. Leadership isn't about titles or authority, it's about the quiet discipline of self-command. Consider the morning ritual of a Fortune 500 CEO who credits Stoicism for his success. Before sunrise, he avoids emails, news, and distractions, not out of luxury but strategy. His first hour belongs to 3 practices: journaling reflections from Marcus Aurelius, visualizing the day's challenges with calm detachment, and a brisk walk in silence. No motivational mantras, no productivity hacks, just deliberate stewardship of his own mind. Why? Because he understands what Epictetus taught. Chaos on the outside can't be managed until there's order on the inside. The inner citadel isn't built in grand gestures. It's fortified through daily micro-choices: the decision to pause before reacting to a provocation, to finish a workout when exhaustion whispers excuses, or to shut down distractions during deep work. These moments seem small, but they're the bricks of self-sovereignty. Every time you override an impulse, you strengthen the walls. Yet modern life constantly besieges that citadel. The endless scroll of social media weakens focus. The dopamine hits of notifications train impulsivity. Even well-meaning habits like multitasking erode our capacity for sustained command. A Stanford study found chronic multitaskers performed worse at focusing than those who single-tasked. Their brains had literally forgotten how to concentrate. That's why the Stoic morning matters. It's not about productivity, it's about reclaiming your attention before the world scatters it. Here's your challenge. Audit one routine that subtly undermines your self-command. Maybe it's reaching for your phone upon waking, letting the inbox dictate your priorities, or indulging in midday gossip. Now redesign it with Citadel building intent. Replace the morning scroll with 5 minutes of reflection. Schedule email checks instead of reacting to every ping. Turn commute time into audiobook learning. These aren't lifestyle tweaks, they're tactical drills for mental sovereignty. Because here's the paradox: the more you govern yourself, the less you need to control others. Teams naturally align behind leaders whose inner stability is unshakable. Families mirror the emotional rhythms set at the top. Even in ancient Rome, senators watched Marcus Aurelius composed responses more than his edicts. His self-mastery was the real legislation. So ask yourself today, where are your citadel walls thin? What daily habit, if strengthened, would ripple through every decision you make? The answer isn't found in Stoic texts. It's in the quiet moments before the world wakes up, when you choose who commands the fortress within. Seneca once compared the mind to a storm-tossed sea, waves of emotion crashing against reason's shore. Yet he insisted tranquility wasn't found by escaping the storm, but by discovering an unshakable stillness beneath it. The Stoics called this ataraxia, not the absence of chaos, but the mastery of moving through it undisturbed. Picture a hospital ER during a mass casualty event. Amidst the frenzy, the best physicians don't match the panic. They become the calm center around which order forms. Their steady hands and measured tones aren't just comforting, they're strategic. That's ataraxia in action, a competitive advantage disguised as serenity. The ancient Stoics developed breath control techniques eerily similar to modern Navy SEAL tactics. When Epictetus taught students to pause and take a deep breath before reacting, he wasn't offering spiritual advice, he was wiring a neurological circuit breaker. Science now shows controlled breathing slows heart rate, oxygenates the brain, and shifts control from the reactive amygdala to the prefrontal cortex. It's why elite athletes freeze for a breath before a penalty kick, and why hostage negotiators deliberately exhale before responding to demands. That split-second pause isn't hesitation. It's the Stoic gap where reason overrides reflex. Consider the Fukushima nuclear plant manager who stayed composed during the 2011 tsunami. As sirens blared and radiation alarms screamed, he methodically prioritized actions based on Stoic-like principles. What's happening isn't as important as what I do next. His team later credited his calm presence with preventing panic decisions that could have triggered meltdowns. This wasn't innate temperament, it was trained composure. Like Seneca writing philosophy while exiled on a barren island, he proved stillness isn't passive. It's the platform for precision under fire. Let's forge this skill now with a 1-minute drill. First, plant your feet firmly. Ancient Stoics stood while practicing this to anchor mind and body. Inhale for 4 counts, imagining clarity flowing in. Hold for 4, visualizing chaos as passing clouds. Exhale for 6, releasing tension like steam from a valve. Repeat. That's not meditation, it's cognitive recalibration. Do this before high-stakes meetings, difficult conversations, or even scrolling the news. Each breath is a reminder. Between stimulus and response, there's a harbor no storm can reach. The stillness advantage isn't about feeling less, it's about thinking clearly when others can't. Seneca survived Nero's court not by outshouting the madness, but by becoming the eye of the hurricane. Your greatest power as a leader isn't in the speeches you give or strategies you devise, but in the quiet moments where you choose not to be swept away. Strategic indifference sounds like a contradiction. How can you be both strategic and indifferent? But the Stoics weren't talking about apathy. They meant something far more powerful, the deliberate calibration of your attention, like a spotlight operator deciding which actors to illuminate on stage. Consider the difference between a novice chess player who reacts to every move with equal alarm and a grandmaster who ignores minor threats to focus on the board's pivotal squares. That's Stoic indifference, not blindness to reality, but ruthless prioritization of what truly moves the needle. Marcus Aurelius modeled this in his reign. While lesser emperors wasted energy on palace gossip or petty rivalries, he kept his focus locked on just 3 things: the welfare of Rome, the discipline of his mind, and the duties before him. Everything else, flattery, insults, even threats, he treated with what the Stoics called adiaphora, matters neither good nor bad, just irrelevant to his mission. This wasn't neglect, it was the ultimate leadership hack. By refusing to let trivialities hijack his bandwidth, he conserved energy for decisions that shaped an empire. Modern psychology validates this approach. Studies show the average professional makes 35,000 decisions daily, most unconsciously. Like a phone running background apps, our brains drain power on micro choices: what to wear, how to respond to a snarky email, whether to refresh social media. The Stoic solution, a not-to-do list. Legendary investor Warren Buffett credits his success not just to brilliant picks, but to systematically ignoring 99% of opportunities. He once told his pilot to write down 25 career goals, then circle just 5. The other 20, Buffett said, those are your avoid-at-all-cost list. That's strategic indifference in action, defining what doesn't deserve your focus so the essentials get undiluted attention. Here's the pivot most miss. Indifference isn't about ignoring more, it's about valuing less. Take a CEO facing a PR crisis. The amateur obsesses over every tweet and pundit's hot take. The Stoic leader, they categorize responses into 3 buckets: actionable feedback, constructive criticism, and noise. The first 2 get engagement, the last gets silence. This isn't arrogance, it's the recognition that reacting to everything means mastering nothing. Your challenge today isn't to add another task to your routine. It's to delete one. Identify a single energy leak, maybe that group chat that breeds outrage but not insight, or the news habit that informs nothing but anxiety. Then enact your own adiaphora, mute it, delegate it, or let it expire. Like a gardener pruning dead branches, you're not losing anything of value, you're creating space for what actually grows. Because the ultimate power move isn't multitasking. It's knowing what to unplug from so your real priorities hum with undivided voltage. Steve Jobs stood before Stanford's graduating class in 2005 and delivered a line that would echo for decades. Remembering that you are going to die is the best way to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. At first glance, it sounds dark, morbid even, but the Stoics knew what Jobs rediscovered. Death isn't just an end. It's the ultimate focusing lens. They called it Memento Mori, not a morbid obsession, but a wake-up call carved in stone. Picture the ancient Roman general parading through the streets after a great victory. Behind him, a slave whispered in his ear, "Respice post te, hominum te es memento." Look behind you, remember you are mortal. That wasn't meant to kill the celebration, it was meant to energize it. The mortality mirror does something extraordinary. It strips away the trivial. When you truly internalize that your time is finite, the distractions that once consumed you, office politics, social media comparisons, the chase for others' approval, start to feel like sand slipping through your fingers. Jobs described this as death's greatest gift, the clarity to ask, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I am about to do? When the answer is no for too many days in a row, change becomes urgent, not optional. Consider the contrast between two approaches to time. Most people live as if they're immortal, postponing hard conversations, delaying creative projects, tolerating joyless routines. Someday, they tell themselves, when the timing's right. The Stoic, they live with a silent clock ticking in their chest, not in panic but in precision. The Roman philosopher Seneca wrote scathingly about this in On the Shortness of Life. You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire. We fear embarrassment as if it's eternal, yet waste hours as if we have an endless supply. Here's where Memento Mori shifts from philosophy to practice. Take out a sheet of paper and divide it into two columns. Label one legacy and the other distractions. Now, imagine you've just received a terminal diagnosis with 6 months left. What projects would you accelerate? Which relationships would you repair? What truths would you finally speak? Those go in the first column. Then note what suddenly seems irrelevant. The meetings that could be emails, the grudges you've nursed, the perfectionism that's paralyzed you. That's your distraction list. The gap between these columns is your blueprint for living with urgency. This isn't about bucket lists or reckless abandon. It's about aligning your daily choices with what truly matters. A study of hospice nurses revealed the most common regret of the dying wasn't "I wish I'd worked more." It was "I wish I'd had the courage to live true to myself." The Stoics framed this as amor fati, the love of fate, not waiting for ideal conditions, but making meaning in the conditions you have. When the entrepreneur Sarah Blakely was rejected by every manufacturer for her Spanx prototype, she didn't wait for validation. She wore the prototype herself to pitch meetings, knowing time was too precious to waste on hesitation. Your challenge this week: live 7 days as if they're your last, not with dramatic gestures, but with ruthless prioritization. Decline anything that doesn't light your soul on fire. Have that conversation you've been avoiding. Start the project that scares you. Notice how mortality doesn't shrink your life, it expands it. Because when you stop pretending you have forever, you start acting like you have something worth rushing for. Seneca's letters reveal a brutal truth: every yes we give is a theft from something more deserving. He wrote to his friend Lucilius about a man who complained of having no time, to which Seneca replied, "You act as if your time were free." That sting wasn't meant to shame, it was surgical precision, cutting through the illusion that busyness equals purpose. The Stoic no isn't about rejection, it's about protection. Guarding your hours like a general defends a fortress gate, because distractions don't just cost minutes, they erode your capacity to lead. History's most effective leaders wielded this discipline ruthlessly. When Warren Buffett took over Berkshire Hathaway, he didn't just say no to bad investments, he built an entire philosophy around it. His two-list strategy forced him to write down 25 goals, circle the top 5, and treat the rest like landmines to avoid. That Stoic boundary setting in action, recognizing that dilution isn't just inefficiency, it's self-sabotage. Weak leaders confuse accessibility with availability, mistaking endless meetings for influence. Strong leaders know their real currency isn't time, but focused attention. But here's where we falter. We fear no will make us seem selfish or uncooperative. So we agree to that extra project, the pointless committee, the coffee chat that goes nowhere. Each yes seems harmless until we're left with scraps of energy for what truly matters. Seneca diagnosed this centuries ago. We are tight-fisted with property and money, yet think too little of wasting time, the one thing about which we should all be the toughest misers. Let's reframe refusal as strategic generosity to yourself and others. When you decline a low-impact request, you're not being rude, you're honoring your existing commitments with full presence. Try these Stoic-tested scripts. I can't give this the attention it deserves right now. Respectful, principle-based, I'm guarding my capacity for current priorities. Transparent, non-negotiable, let me suggest someone better suited. Solution-oriented, notice these aren't apologies, they're declarations, the difference. Apologies frame no as failure. Declarations assert it as strategy. Your challenge today: audit your commitments like a Stoic accountant. List every recurring meeting, side project, and obligation. Now channel Seneca's razor. Does this align with my core mission or merely fill the calendar? Prune without mercy, because the path to impact isn't paved with what you add, it's cleared by what you remove. Marcus Aurelius faced a rebellion in Syria that could have shattered his empire. Instead of crushing it with brute force, he did something unexpected. He offered pardons, restructured governance, and addressed the underlying grievances. This wasn't weakness, it was adaptive rigidity, the Stoic art of holding principles firm while bending tactics. The emperor's journals reveal his reasoning. The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing, because it requires readiness to stand firm and withstand sudden attacks, but also the agility to pivot when the ground shifts. That balance between unshakable ethics and tactical flexibility is the mark of truly resilient leadership. Consider the difference between a mighty oak and bamboo in a storm. The oak stands rigid until it snaps. The bamboo bends, then springs back stronger. Both have strength, but only one survives the hurricane. Modern tech leaders embody this duality. When Netflix's Reed Hastings pivoted from mailing DVDs to streaming, he wasn't abandoning his vision of entertainment dominance. He was recalibrating its delivery. His core principle, delivering content seamlessly, remained ironclad. The method, infinitely adaptable. That Stoic flexibility in action, knowing what's sacred, your why, and what's negotiable, your how. Yet most of us default to extremes. We either cling to plans like life rafts, even as the ship sinks, or we flip-flop so often that we lose all direction. The Stoics called this the vice of stubbornness and the vice of fickleness, twin traps that sabotage decision-making. Marcus Aurelius avoided both during Rome's wars. When barbarian tribes breached the Danube, he didn't rigidly insist on old battle tactics. He adapted formations, absorbed guerrilla strategies, even integrated enemy warriors into his ranks. But he never compromised his ultimate aim, securing Rome's safety. His flexibility served his firmness. Here's where self-awareness becomes your compass. Think of a current challenge, maybe a strained relationship, a career crossroads, or a creative block. Now ask, am I being rigid about the wrong things? Are you clinging to a job title while neglecting the growth it once represented? Or conversely, are you abandoning values just to keep the peace? The tech founder who pivots from user privacy today to monetization for quick profits isn't adapting, they're betraying. The leader who refuses to update outdated policies isn't principled, they're obstinate. Try this exercise. Draw 2 concentric circles. In the inner ring, list your non-negotiables values like integrity, respect, or mission. In the outer ring, jot down methods, processes, timelines, even roles. Now audit your current struggles. Are you treating outer ring items as if they're inner ring absolutes? That's rigidity masquerading as principle. Or have you let inner ring values erode for outer ring convenience? That's flexibility rotting into compromise. The Stoic leader knows when to stand like a cliff against the waves and when to flow like water around rocks. Your challenge today, pick one area where you've been dogmatic and ask, is this principle or habit? Then choose one where you've been lax and ask, am I adapting or abandoning? The wisdom lies not in choosing between firmness and flexibility, but in mastering both at once. Epictetus didn't believe in talent, he believed in melite, the Stoic practice of relentless rehearsal. Picture a concert violinist backstage, not just warming up fingers, but visualizing every bow stroke, every possible string snap, even the glare of a harsh spotlight. That's not anxiety, it's anticipatory mastery. The Stoics knew what modern neuroscience confirms. Confidence isn't innate, it's earned through systematic exposure to what could go wrong. When Epictetus told his students to practice poverty by wearing thin cloaks or skipping meals, he wasn't promoting suffering, he was building decision-making muscle memory. Because the leader who's rehearsed adversity doesn't just handle crises better, they recognize them sooner. Take the legendary pianist Glenn Gould, who didn't just play Bach's Goldberg variations, he dissected them. Gould would practice passages at glacial speeds, then backwards, then with only his left hand. By the time he performed, every possible stumble had been preempted. That's melite in action, transforming uncertainty into a catalog of conquered scenarios. The same principle applies to leadership. A CEO who role-plays tough conversations, not just once, but with varied objections, interruptions, even emotional outbursts, doesn't just deliver feedback better. They radiate the quiet assurance that comes from having already lived this moment 100 times in their mind. Here's where most professionals misfire. They mistake familiarity with skill. Reading about negotiation tactics isn't the same as drilling them with a colleague pretending to be an obstinate client. Watching leadership seminars doesn't equate to simulating layoff announcements in front of a mirror. The Stoics were adamant. Theoretical wisdom without practical ascesis is like a scalpel in untrained hands, dangerous. Your challenge this week, identify one high-stakes skill you rely on but haven't stress-tested. Is it public speaking? Run your next talk in an empty room first, then to a critical friend. Financial forecasting. Model worst-case scenarios beyond spreadsheets, script how you'd explain them to stakeholders. The goal isn't to eliminate nerves, it's to make your competence so rehearsed that when pressure hits, your preparation speaks louder than your fear. Because true confidence isn't the absence of doubt, it's the presence of proof. every time Epictetus made his students argue both sides of a debate or endure mock insults, he was proving to them, "You've survived this before." That's the Stoic secret, not hoping you'll rise to the occasion, but knowing you already have. Marcus Aurelius had a secret weapon against petty grievances and short-sighted decisions, a mental exercise he called the view from above. Picture yourself floating high above the earth, watching your life unfold like a tiny scene in a vast cosmic theater, those heated arguments barely audible whispers. That promotion you're obsessing over, a speck in the grand tapestry of time, this wasn't about diminishing your struggles, it was about expanding your vision. Modern astronauts experience something eerily similar, the overview effect. When they gaze at Earth from space, national borders vanish and personal grudges feel absurdly small. What emerges isn't detachment but clarity, the kind that separates what truly matters from what merely feels urgent in the moment. Think of a CEO deciding whether to lay off staff to meet quarterly targets. The narrow view fixates on spreadsheets and shareholder pressure. The cosmic view, it sees the ripple effects: families destabilized, communities impacted, long-term trust eroded. Or consider a parent screaming at a referee during their child's soccer game. Zoom out, and it's a meaningless blip in a relationship that spans decades. The Stoics knew this shift wasn't just philosophical, it was tactical. When you trade the microscope for the telescope, impulsive reactions lose their grip and strategic wisdom takes over. Here's how to practice this today. Close your eyes and imagine rising above your current challenge, a workplace conflict, a financial stressor, even a personal insecurity. Watch it shrink as you ascend until the buildings become toys and the voices fade. Notice how the horizon expands, revealing interconnected systems, the colleagues who depend on your leadership, the family shaped by your mood, the future self who will look back on this moment. Now ask, will this matter in 5 years, not as a dismissal, but as a prioritization filter? The inventor Nikola Tesla used a version of this, visualizing his electrical systems from multiple scales simultaneously, a skill that birthed breakthroughs. The irony, narrow thinking often masquerades as practicality. We tell ourselves we're being realistic when we fixate on immediate wins or petty slights. But history's most impactful leaders, from Lincoln navigating civil war to scientists curing diseases, operated with this expansive lens. They understood what astronauts confirm. From space, you don't see the chaos of city streets. You see patterns, networks, and the fragile beauty of what's worth fighting for. Your turn. Pick one decision weighing on you right now. Maybe it's a career move, a relationship crossroads, or even how to spend tonight's free hours. Now take 5 minutes to soar above it. Literally visualize your life from orbit. Watch how the trivial falls away and the essential comes into sharp focus. That's not escapism, it's the ultimate leadership hack. Because when you stop seeing the world through a keyhole, you start making choices that resonate far beyond the moment. Seneca once scolded his friend Lucilius for boasting about working through the night. "You're not industrious," he wrote, "you're sleep-deprived." 2,000 years before Silicon Valley glorified burnout, Stoics recognized a radical truth. Rest isn't laziness, it's strategic energy management. Think of a Formula One pit crew. They don't skip tire changes to prove dedication. They know peak performance demands deliberate pauses. Modern science confirms this. A Harvard study found sleep-deprived professionals operate with the cognitive impairment of someone legally drunk. Yet hustle culture treats exhaustion like a badge of honor, as if running on fumes proves your worth. The Stoic alternative: treat recovery with the same discipline as ambition. Consider the ritual of a Fortune 500 CEO who credits Stoicism for her success. Her secret weapon isn't a productivity hack, it's an unbreakable 8-hour sleep rule. Before bed, she follows Seneca's wind-down practice. An hour of reading philosophy, no screens, a hot bath to signal the nervous system, and a gratitude journal to shift from doing to being. This isn't luxury, it's cognitive maintenance. Just as Roman soldiers sharpened swords nightly, she sharpens her mind's edge through restoration. The result: decision-making clarity that outpaces sleep-deprived rivals. But here's where we get trapped. We confuse motion with progress, mistaking long hours for meaningful work. Marcus Aurelius warned against this. Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? A modern executive might brag about answering emails at 2 a.m. The Stoic would ask, could this wait until dawn when my mind is actually functional? Neuroscience backs this. Deep sleep phases act like a mental janitorial crew, flushing toxins, consolidating memories, and resetting emotional resilience. Skimp on sleep and you're essentially hoarding mental trash. Your turn. Conduct a Stoic energy audit this week. Track not just work hours but recovery quality. Did you scroll mindlessly until midnight, bombarding your brain with blue light? Or did you emulate the ancients with a deliberate transition ritual, perhaps a walk without headphones to decompress, or 10 minutes of reflection? Notice the correlation between these choices and next-day focus. The ultimate Stoic paradox: sometimes the most powerful action is inaction. Just as farmers let fields lie fallow to yield richer harvests, your mind needs dormant periods to generate breakthroughs. Tesla conceived alternating current during a walk. Archimedes shouted Eureka in a bath. These weren't accidents, they were the fruits of disciplined rest. So tonight, when you're tempted to burn the midnight oil, remember Seneca's prescription: the bow kept always taut will break. Your greatest work awaits not in exhaustion's haze, but in the clarity that follows true recovery. The most valuable currency in leadership isn't charisma or intelligence, it's trust. And the Stoics understood its foundation better than anyone. They called it arete, the unwavering commitment to excellence in character, where every promise becomes a brick in the fortress of your integrity. Think of a general whose troops would follow him into hell not because of his title, but because they knew his word was ironclad. That's the Stoic trust equation. Consistency over time equals unshakable authority. History offers a masterclass in this through the story of Cincinnatus, the Roman farmer turned dictator. When invaders threatened Rome, the Senate begged him to take absolute power. He crushed the enemy in days, then did something unheard of. He resigned immediately, returning to his plow. No excuses, no delays, no clinging to authority. That single act cemented a reputation so trustworthy that centuries later, George Washington would model his own leadership on it. Why? Because Cincinnatus understood what modern leaders often forget. Trust isn't built in grand gestures, but in the relentless alignment of words and deeds. Every kept promise strengthens your voice. Every broken one erodes it like acid on marble. Consider the modern workplace. A manager who cancels ones repeatedly might justify it as too busy, but the subconscious message screams, you're not a priority. Contrast that with a leader who shows up precisely at 8 a.m. for weekly mentoring sessions, rain or shine. Their reliability becomes psychological safety, a signal that commitments matter. Neuroscience confirms this. When someone's actions match their words consistently, our brains release oxytocin, the bonding chemical that underpins trust. The Stoics didn't need fMRI scans to know this. They saw how Alexander the Great's army marched farther for him than for his father, not because he was a better tactician, but because he slept on the same hard ground as his soldiers, just as he'd promised. Now audit your own trust ledger. Start small. Recall the last time you said, "I'll get to that tomorrow." Did tomorrow arrive? What about the casual "let's grab coffee" you never followed through on? These aren't just forgotten promises, they're tiny fractures in your credibility. The Stoic remedy is brutal honesty. If you can't commit, don't speak. Better silence than hollow words. Here's the paradox. In an age of constant communication, we've never been more unreliable. Emails go unanswered, meetings run late, deadlines blur. But the leaders who rise, whether in boardrooms or friendships, are those who treat their yes as sacred and their no as final. Like Marcus Aurelius writing his nightly reflections, holding himself accountable to his own standards, you'll find that trust isn't given. It's earned, one kept promise at a time. So tonight, ask yourself, if your followers tracked your words as closely as you track theirs, would your authority grow or crumble? Epictetus threw a challenge at his students that still stings centuries later. If someone told you that others were speaking ill of you behind your back, would you rush to defend yourself? His point wasn't about ignoring feedback. It was about exposing the raw nerve of our dependence on external validation. The Stoics built what might be history's first psychological armor, not against criticism itself, but against the corrosive need to be universally liked. Imagine a politician torn between polling data and policy convictions. The crowd pleaser flip-flops with the winds of opinion. The Stoic leader, they measure their worth against an inner compass, knowing that applause is as fickle as weather. This isn't theoretical. Take the case of Patagonia's founder Yvon Chouinard, who risked his entire customer base by bluntly telling shoppers, "Don't buy this jacket," in a landmark ad campaign. While competitors chased endless growth, Chouinard confronted consumers with the environmental cost of overconsumption, a move that should have backfired. Instead, it magnetized a tribe who shared his values. That's the paradox Stoics uncovered. When you stop contorting yourself to fit others' expectations, you attract those who resonate with your authentic stance. But here's where our instincts betray us. We're wired to crave approval, a survival holdover from when tribal rejection meant literal peril. Modern psychology shows social pain activates the same neural pathways as physical injury. The Stoic remedy, a daily practice of controlled discomfort. Just as athletes train in harsh conditions to adapt, you can inoculate yourself against opinion dependence. Start small, wear an unconventional outfit and notice others' glances without adjusting. Share an unpopular but reasoned viewpoint in a meeting. Each time you resist the urge to people please, you strengthen what Warren Buffett calls the inner scorecard, the private metrics of integrity that matter more than crowd noise. The ultimate test comes when facing outright hostility. Marcus Aurelius faced riots over grain shortages, yet his journals reveal no desperation for public love, only a focus on just solutions. Contrast that with leaders who dilute tough decisions in endless committees, seeking consensus where none exists. The Stoic approach: listen to feedback with detached curiosity, as if studying a foreign culture. Ask, does this critique reveal truth about my actions, or merely about the critic's biases? Even brutal feedback becomes data when stripped of emotional charge. Your challenge today: find one piece of criticism that stung recently, a performance review dig, a social media jab, even a partner's offhand remark. Instead of reacting or rationalizing, sit with it for 10 minutes. Imagine holding it at arm's length like a scientist examining a specimen. Does it hold actionable insight? If so, extract it. If not, watch how your need for it to not be true dissolves when you stop conflating disagreement with danger. That's the Stoic shield in action, not deflecting arrows, but realizing you were never the target to begin with. Seneca's lantern flickered late into the night. not over state documents or philosophical treatises, but over a simple leather-bound journal. This was his sacred space for the daily review, a Stoic ritual so potent that modern neuroscience would later validate its power. Picture this, the second most powerful man in Rome, dissecting his own behavior with the precision of a surgeon, asking not what did I achieve today, but where did I stray from my principles? That's the heart of Stoic reflection, not self-congratulation, but course correction. The practice hinges on three piercing questions, each designed to expose the gap between intention and action. First, where did I act against my values? Seneca didn't sugarcoat failures. If he snapped at a servant or indulged in gossip, he recorded it coldly, not to self-flagellate, but to spot behavioral patterns. Second, what could I have done better? This wasn't about regret, it was about rehearsing alternate responses. Like an athlete reviewing game footage, he'd mentally rewrite scenes where he'd been reactive rather than deliberate. Third, and most radically, what am I clinging to that doesn't serve me? Here, he'd identify attachments to status, comfort, others' opinions that distorted his judgment. Fast forward 2 millennia to a Silicon Valley CEO who adapted this ritual into a 10-minute nightly debrief. Her template, 3 columns, triggers what sparked strong emotions, responses how she reacted, and alignment whether those actions matched her leadership philosophy. One entry revealed a telling pattern. Every time she skipped lunch, afternoon meetings devolved into terse exchanges. The fix wasn't willpower, it was a standing calendar alert labeled fuel for wisdom. Another executive uses voice memos to recap interactions where he lost his Stoic footing, analyzing vocal tone and word choice like an actor reviewing a performance. Your 1-week challenge begins tonight. Set a phone reminder for 30 minutes before bed, no screens, just pen and paper. Start small. Identify just one moment today where you were your best self and one where you fell short. The goal isn't comprehensive accounting, it's building the habit of honest self-observation. By week's end, you'll notice something profound. The mere anticipation of your evening review begins shaping daytime choices. Like Seneca, you'll start spotting temptations to stray from principle and pausing long enough to choose differently. That's the alchemy of the daily review. It turns hindsight into foresight. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire with a single mantra echoing in his mind: simplify. Not as a lifestyle choice, but as a survival tactic. While lesser leaders drowned in scrolls of petitions and protocols, he carved through complexity with surgical precision. The emperor's private journals reveal a man obsessed with stripping away the non-essential, writing, "If you seek tranquility, do less." Then, with Stoic irony, he clarified not just less, but only what's necessary. That distinction is the razor's edge between true minimalism and mere laziness. Modern leaders face a paradox: more tools than ever to streamline work, yet unprecedented levels of decision fatigue. Enter Eisenhower's urgency/importance matrix, a battle-tested tool that could have been ripped from Stoic playbooks. The former U.S. President and 5-star general divided tasks into 4 quadrants: urgent and important crises, deadlines, not urgent but important planning, relationships, urgent but not important interruptions, some emails, and neither urgent nor important mindless scrolling, gossip. The Stoic twist: he treated the bottom 2 quadrants like landmines, tasks to delegate or delete with extreme prejudice. Consider the CEO who reduced her weekly meetings from 20 to 4 by applying this filter. Every invite now faced a brutal interrogation. Does this align with our 3 core objectives this quarter? If not, it was cut. The result: her team's strategic output doubled, not through working harder, but by ceasing to do what never mattered. That's the minimalist leader's superpower, recognizing that every yes to trivia is a no to transcendence. Your turn. Grab paper and draw 2 lines, creating 4 boxes. Label them as Eisenhower did. Now, list your past week's activities in each. The revelation: most energy drains live in quadrant 3, the urgent but unimportant black hole. Those constant pings for quick thoughts on low-stakes issues, their decision-making kryptonite, fracturing focus into worthless fragments. But here's where Stoics go further. They don't just eliminate distractions, they annihilate entire categories of unnecessary choices. Barack Obama wore only blue or gray suits during his presidency. "I'm trying to pare down decisions," he explained. "I don't want to think about what I'm eating or wearing." Steve Jobs' black turtlenecks weren't a fashion statement, they were cognitive armor against trivial choices. Now craft your stop doing list, not tomorrow, now. Start with 3 items that feel productive but aren't. Maybe it's attending that recurring meeting where you've never contributed, or compulsively checking metrics that haven't changed. Then, the harder cut: one good activity that's crowding out the great. Perhaps it's a side project that's plateaued, or a networking habit that yields little but exhaustion. The minimalist leader doesn't just manage time, they curate existence. Like a sculptor chipping away marble to reveal the statue within, each elimination reveals your true capacity. Because in the end, legacy isn't built by what you add, but by what you dared to remove. Marcus Aurelius wrote his private meditations knowing they'd outlive him, not for fame, but as a compass for future generations. That's the Stoic legacy lens, measuring every choice not by its immediate applause, but by its echoes through time. Consider the difference between a politician campaigning for re-election and a scientist laboring on research they'll never see completed. One chases the dopamine hit of short-term validation. The other plants trees whose shade they'll never sit under. The Stoics called this sympatheia, the interconnectedness of all things across time, and it reshapes leadership from a sprint into a relay race where the baton matters more than the runner. Take the Rockefeller Foundation's century-long war against yellow fever. When John D. Rockefeller funded mosquito research in the 1920s, critics called it a vanity project. But his team's persistence across decades through wars, economic crashes, and scientific dead ends ultimately eradicated the disease, saving millions of unborn lives. That's legacy thinking, sacrificing the gratification of quick wins for impact that compounds beyond a single lifespan. Contrast this with modern CEOs slashing R&D budgets to inflate quarterly earnings. The Stoic question isn't "what will this gain me?" but "what will this make possible?" Legacy isn't just for billionaires. A teacher who stays late to mentor struggling students crafts ripples that outlast curriculum changes. A parent breaking cycles of dysfunction gifts descendants a psychological inheritance more valuable than any trust fund. Even small daily choices like refusing to cut ethical corners for temporary advantage build what the Stoics termed character capital. Your reputation, they believed, isn't what people say at your eulogy. It's the sum of every moment you chose integrity over convenience. Here's the litmus test: when facing a decision, project its consequences forward 50 years. The tech founder debating whether to sell user data sees immediate profits, but the legacy-aware founder asks, "Will this betrayal of trust haunt my company's obituary?" The Stoics practiced this through premeditatio malorum, imagining their own death to clarify what truly deserved their energy. Modern psychology confirms this works. People who visualize their future selves make wiser long-term choices, from retirement savings to health habits. Your challenge today isn't to draft a will or endow a scholarship. It's to pick one ordinary decision: hiring, spending, even how you argue with your partner, and examine it through the legacy lens. Ask, if this choice became a family story told generations from now, would it inspire or caution? Because the Stoics knew a truth we often forget: you're already building your monument. Every day, brick by brick, Viktor Frankl stared into the abyss of Auschwitz and discovered an iron law of human nature. Those who survived weren't always the strongest or healthiest. They were those who clung to purpose like a lifeline. His observation wasn't just tragic wisdom, it was clinical fact. Prisoners who could answer why they needed to live, whether for a child waiting at home or a book unwritten, endured conditions that broke others. This mirrors the Stoic imperative to live according to nature, which sounds abstract until you realize nature's first law is this: every organism has a function. An acorn becomes an oak, a river carves canyons. Your unshakable core isn't found in titles or trophies, but in answering one question with brutal honesty: what is my unique work in the world? Purpose isn't a grand destiny reserved for saints and CEOs. It's the silent compass guiding micro-choices, the extra 10 minutes mentoring a junior colleague when no one's watching, the refusal to cut corners on a project that won't earn applause, the patience mustered during a toddler's tantrum because you're shaping a human, not just managing behavior. Frankl called this meaning in suffering. The Stoics called it proheresis, the alignment of will with cosmic duty. Both understood that drift is the enemy of resilience. A ship without a rudder isn't free, it's hostage to every current. Consider the contrast between two entrepreneurs. One chases trending industries, pivoting with market winds. The other, like Patagonia's Yvon Chouinard, builds around an unyielding ethos. We're in business to save our home planet. When the first faces setbacks, they question everything. When the second hits obstacles, they dig deeper because their why transforms barriers into proving grounds. That's the power of an existential anchor. It turns endurance from gritted teeth into something closer to devotion. Your mission statement isn't a corporate plaque or LinkedIn mantra. It's a filter for decision fatigue. The Stoics practiced this through morning meditations, asking, what would the person I aspire to be do today? Frankl's logotherapy took it further. If this were my last day, would it still feel worth doing? Try drafting yours with 3 layers: craft, cause, and character. Start with what you do exceptionally: craft, then why it matters beyond yourself: cause, and finally, who you must become to honor both: character. For example, I design technology: craft, that democratizes education; cause, with relentless integrity; character. This isn't navel-gazing. When IBM's turnaround CEO Arvind Krishna took the helm, he didn't start with strategy slides. He gathered his team to revisit why IBM existed. Out went divisions that didn't serve their core purpose of solving complex problems. In came ruthless focus on quantum computing and AI ethics. That's the Stoic Frankl fusion, letting purpose prune distractions like a gardener's shears. So grab a notebook, not your phone, and sketch your tripartite mission. No platitudes, no jargon, just the raw, uncomfortable clarity of what you're willing to suffer for. Because when the storm hits, you won't remember your resume. You'll cling to your why like a cliff edge and discover it's not just holding you, it's pulling you higher. We've traveled through the Stoic arsenal: emotional control that transforms panic into precision, perspective that turns obstacles into fuel, courage rooted in principle rather than impulse, and preparation that makes adversity feel familiar rather than frightening. These aren't ancient relics, they're leadership superpowers waiting to be claimed. Epictetus put it perfectly: it's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters. And that reaction, it's not some mystical trait you're born with, it's judgment trained through daily practice, like a blacksmith tempering steel. Here's your final challenge, your Rubicon moment. Within the next 24 hours, choose one Stoic strategy to activate. Maybe it's pausing for 3 breaths before responding to a provocation, or rewriting a frustration using raw facts instead of emotional narrative. Perhaps it's rehearsing a tough conversation aloud, or finally making that decision you've been circling like a hawk. Don't just consider it, commit, write it down now. Then step into the arena. The Stoics didn't study philosophy to sound clever at dinner parties. They forged these tools in the fires of real-life crises, wars, betrayals, plagues. Now the torch passes to you. Whether you're leading a team, a family, or simply your own unruly mind, these principles don't just help you survive chaos, they help you command it. If one strategy particularly resonated, maybe the dichotomy of control or the view from above, hit the comments and share which one. Your insight might light the path for another traveler. For those hungry to go deeper, explore our videos on turning fear into focus or Seneca's letters on overcoming adversity. But wherever your journey leads next, remember, true strength isn't about never faltering. It's about knowing how to rise each time you do with clarity, purpose, and that unshakable